which is the collaboration for online higher education research, and CSSHE, the Society for the Study in Higher Education, have been working together for about the last 10 years. And over the last 9 years, we've worked together to bring this conference. And we've really tried to look at a 2-day conference that gives people an opportunity to both hear experts, and this year we'll be hearing from students, and to share very innovative practices. Thank you very much, University of Regina, for hosting. I know there's a lot of last-minute work, especially to Kate Cushion, who's the librarian at the university, who handled all of the on-site relationship arrangements. And she's also a program director with Cohere, representing University of Regina. I'd also like to thank a couple of other people. I'd like to thank the Office of the President, who gave us some funding for this conference, and also to the University Librarian, who gave us conference funding, which will be used to host the reception tonight at the Hotel Saskatchewan. I hope that you'll all be able to attend. I'd also like to just remind you that CHUR, the Center for Higher Education Research and Development, has a draw box outside for a free online course in university leadership and administration. So please put your name in. They're short online freebie courses geared to mid-managers in higher education. So we hope that you'll be interested in putting your name in. So I'd like to actually call on Dr. Dina McMartin, the Associate Vice President, Academic and Research from University of Regina, to give us an official welcome on behalf of University of Regina.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our delegates, the speakers, students, guests, everyone for coming to Regina on what has turned out to be a relatively chilly day. It's nice to be indoors for a day like today. And a special welcome to those of you who've come in from out of province. We always like to see our local folks show up, and we have a really nice U of R contingent here, which is so nice to see. It's also really great to invite people and welcome you from other parts of the country. So thank you for being here. I do want to acknowledge and thank Kathleen for her leadership in Cohere and for being such a great supporter of the event being held at the University of Regina. Of course, we all know that Alec Couros is in the house. He'll be giving the opening keynote address. Valerie Irvin from UVic, I believe, is here. There you are. We'll be giving the closing keynote. So from start to finish, you're in the audience. People will probably want to talk to you ahead of time if they don't get a chance afterwards. And especially to Kate Cushion, who's really been the leader on this and for doing such an incredible job of organizing the conference. I had a couple heart palpitations when we were first looking at the numbers for registration, and I am so pleased. Obviously, Cohere and Kate and the team has done such an amazing job of getting the word out and demonstrating that a high-quality program is available for everyone to enjoy. So the University of Regina is an appropriate place to hold this conference because we have a 40-year history of really being committed to reaching out to the community and being a community-based educational institution. We were the first university in Canada to partner with China. We've actually celebrated more than 30 years of agreement with China last year. We're celebrating our 40th anniversary as an independent university this year. So there's a lot of milestones that we're very happy to share with you while you're here. We also have 3 federated colleges with really long-standing relationships there, including the First Nations University that began in 1976. And so we have this community outreach, distance and distributed learning model that we've used for quite a while. And in recent years, we've worked really hard to enhance diversity and accessibility to our campus and to our courses and our programs. And these include things like the indigenization strategies that we've been undertaking in terms of an Aboriginal advisory circle to the President, a group of scholars and students who advise the President on how to improve and enhance access to education and understanding through education of indigenization. We have mentorship programs and an executive lead in that area as well. We also have a large international set of activities. And of course, every university is doing this. It's part of the federal mandate as well as our provincial governments. And what we're most proud about in terms of enhanced activity and accessibility is our UR Campus for All program, which includes, it started in the Faculty of Education, some really good leadership there, but it's for students with mental and physical disability that would sometimes hold them back from accessing university courses. And we've had several students graduate from these programs now. They're really important parts of our community, and we're so pleased to have found innovative, distributed access to higher education for students with accessibility challenges. So we've done a lot of work in these areas. Our Center for Continuing Education, I saw Harvey come in, our director is here. Our Center for Continuing Education has done an exceptional job in moving toward more online and distributed learning. Of course, Willadell is here as well from the Flexible Learning Division that makes all of that happen. So we're all noticing huge shifts in student demand, in faculty interest, and in teacher delivery options. And part of what this conference is about then is learning more about those, sharing best practices, and hopefully giving everyone an opportunity to implement one or two new ideas after learning from each other over these next few days. So I hope that you'll enjoy your discussion with everyone, and please do enjoy your time at the University of Regina and in the city. I'm hoping that it doesn't snow this evening, even though all indications are in that direction. But at least you can say you've experienced the Saskatchewan snow, which only everyone ever gets to see. Thank you very much, and happy conference.
Okay, thank you very much, Dina. I know you're busy. So I just had a few logistical things. Everybody has one of these. You'll notice you have a mini schedule that has all of the information in here. You'll also notice a ticket. That is a ticket for a drink tonight, courtesy of University of Regina Library for our reception this evening at Hotel Saskatchewan. I'd also like to just let you know that the technical people, we can easily identify, are going to be available during the conference, and they'll be wandering around to each one of the presentation rooms. So I'll get you to wave, and they're there, and so they'll be available. We're all set up in our presentation rooms, but they'll also be available. You also will see some students who are currently actually still at the registration desk and ushering people back. They're wearing bright colored t-shirts. It says U of R Ambassadors, and they're available all during the day to take you back and forth, because we have some activities that take place in somewhat very close but different parts of University of Regina. Also for washrooms, you'll notice to the right there's washrooms, and to the left there's two small private washrooms. On the 6th floor there's also washrooms that you'll see just outside of our meeting rooms. And we'll be having our coffee breaks just outside, and we have special permission to bring coffee and anything into this room for these 2 days of the conference. So did I forget anything about logistics? Okay, I just wanted to be sure. I had to learn where things were myself. I'd like to thank you again for coming. I'd like to thank again our two keynotes, Alec and Valerie. And one of the Cohere practices is that we really want to share knowledge, and both our keynotes today have come just without a per diem. They've come as part of their work and part of their commitment to sharing open education. And that's really important to us because it enables us to keep conference fees at an accessible rate. So thank you very much. So without further ado, Bill, okay, I just want to be sure you were Bill Spazzuti, who is the university librarian, who also has responsibility for the Center of Teaching and Learning, to introduce our first keynote, who is Alec Couros.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to introduce this morning's keynote speaker, Dr. Alec Couros. Dr. Couros is a professor of educational technology and media here at the Faculty of Education here at the University of Regina. Dr. Couros is a much sought social media in education and critical media literacy. His recent publications include a chapter on openness and sharing and teaching practice, and a forthcoming article on enhancing treaty education through digital storytelling. You can find Dr. Couros on Twitter and follow his conversations about technology and learning on his website, and the contact information is all around us. In his presentation this morning, Issues of Access and Diversity for Open and Connected Learning, Dr. Couros will describe open and connected learning as a modern approach to online pedagogy and will identify benefits in having faculty and students become more fully networked in online spaces. Would you please join me in welcoming Dr. Couros?
Hi everyone. Is working okay? Audio? Great. I hope it doesn't snow today because Valerie and I have had this weather war for the last few years. She comes from sunny, well sometimes sunny Victoria, so hopefully it doesn't go to snow tonight. Thanks very much for having me as your keynote speaker. It's rather odd speaking in Regina. I really enjoy here, and being at the university has been a really great time. I think this might be my first opportunity that I've had like this, so it's great to be here. In speaking with students this morning, I realized that some of the topics I get into don't even get close to discussing some of the bigger problems around access and diversity. So what I hope to do here in this presentation is to kind of frame where we're going with learning in general in terms of more of a connected world, and then move into some of the problems that come out of being more connected with our students. I also want to thank Katria Hildebrand, who helped me with a lot of the links that I found today and helped me with the inspiration for some of the pieces I found. Cohere 2014 is the hashtag, and I really encourage you to get connected in that particular space. If you follow the hashtag, if the technology is working well today, I'll be actually tweeting from my computer. So when I get to particular slides, I have this particular style where I go through a lot of slides. I have more slides than minutes that I have available here. But what I tend to do is actually tweet out or auto-tweet from my slides several articles that I come to. It's important, though, I think, in this connected world to start thinking about how we as individuals fit in with our work. And so I always start off the presentation with a bit about me. This is my faculty page when I was much younger, and had a bit of a glow there too. Still at some point, a different world at the time. That particular website, I don't think I've actually updated it in a very, very long time. Because as academics, we end up in this really big blur. At least people who are much more connected, a lot of this stuff ends up all over the place. And I actually have an About Me page. This is my About Me page, which I think was listed there earlier. But it sort of recognizes that as an academic, I'm all over the web. I'm in Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Flickr and Google Plus and Instagram. And I'm all over the place. And there's actually been a lot of some great research around this idea of being a network scholar. Martin Weller from the UK has written a book called The Digital Scholar, which, is my tweeting working? Does anyone confirm or deny that my tweeting's working? I would have maybe tweeted this book at this particular time. It's worthwhile to look at. No, it's not working? Okay, I haven't got there yet. It might be just slow. Also, a fantastic PhD student at UPEI by the name of Bon Stewart. She's Bon Stewart on Twitter. And she's doing a lot of fantastic and really interesting work on network individualism. And I think that's becoming incredibly important to start thinking about how we actually look as network scholars and what does network identity look like online. So when I look at myself, I look first at my professional identity. I've been spending a lot of time really thinning the walls of my classroom. Since about 2007, I've run graduate courses that have invited the entire world to come in. And that's come up with some really interesting pieces. And I really pushed this idea that I think there are places in education, whether it's K-12 education or higher education, that we have for open and close, and there are times that we should be more public and open. A lot of the stuff that I'm teaching happens to be much more public and open. So when I taught this grad course in 2007, it was ECNI 831, it was a course on social media and open education, I decided to do a call for network mentors. So I basically went on Twitter, this was fairly new in 2007, and on my blog, and basically asked for people to collaborate. I ended up, this is like a year before MOOCs were even, before Dave Cormier coined the term. About 1,000 people just came and went in my particular class. I ended up with about 200 mentors, which was at the time about 10 mentors per student, which is actually a pretty interesting ratio. And I don't know if they were exactly mentors as we often know the term, but these were people who popped in, who observed my students, who helped to encourage, to checked on blog posts, and it really freed me up from doing different things. It allowed me to connect differently to my students and help my students become more connected. And so these network mentors ended up being all over the space. If I look at the map, I seem to map everything I do, but it's this idea that, this became this University of Regina chorus that ended up becoming incredibly global in a very short time. Now, my friend Dan Carr over there, back there, yeah, Dan, he actually helped me because I was once described as a techno-communist. So I said, Dan, I need some help with this particular idea, and he helped me create an attack ad on myself, which was great. So you'll hear Dan's voice in this video.
Alec Couros says he's an educator, but has his open doctrine gone too far? In 2008, he facilitated an open online course and made it accessible to the world. Anyone was able to attend. Anyone. And a component of the course relied on students developing their own resources. Their own resources? Is that what they pay for? And what do they know? They're just students. Alec used almost exclusively freely available tools in his course, just like they used back in Soviet Russia. It has even been suggested that Alec Couros may in fact be a Canadian. Alec Couros, don't you think it's time you explained your open doctrine?
Right, so professional identity is a big piece of all of this. And another big piece of this, in terms of being an academic, is this particular personal space. So personal identity is a bit of who I am as well. And you are also seeing students becoming these personal entities online. So I have a bit of a life stream. I have 4 children, which is why I look so tired at the moment. And this is, you'll see prominently sort of my latest one. That seems to be the way it works with children. But I also, I tweet my lunch. This was actually some bananas I was eating one day, and they looked incredibly sad, so I just had to tweet how sad these bananas look. My kids are obviously influenced by technology, as all of them. My 7-year-old paused in the middle of a sentence the other day. My 10-year-old kind of caught on it right away. Like, hold on, Dad, he's just buffering, right? That sort of thing. Summer, we went to Banff or Kananaskis, I believe this was this summer, and I seem to meme things quite a bit. Also seeing the growth and development of my kids, and this is something that we also do in learning very well, is I see, as my children grow and as they sort of multiply, you can sort of see some of the same spaces in Regina that, that they correlate with in this sense. My 100,000th tweet was the birth of my 4th child, so I've actually tweeted that much. So in terms of, pulling this back to sort of the academic life, this was an article from Greenough in 2000, I think this is 2008. Web 2.0 tools exist that might allow academics to reflect and reimagine what they do as scholars. Such tools might positively affect, even transform, research, teaching, and service responsibilities, but, and then this is the caveat, only if scholars choose to build serious academic lives online, presenting semi-public selves and becoming invested in and connected to their students. Another more recent study looks at that professors are actually seen as more credible who tweet, which I think is, who tweet sometimes personal things. I thought that was interesting. So in just sort of the beginning and introducing myself, I've got the greatest lab on the planet in terms of exploring social media. I've got my children that I can look at and explore through technology, and the way we look at learning is certainly around individual achievement. I mean, ultimately, that's what it comes down to, individual achievement. We can do collaboration and cooperation through our classes all day, but it ends up coming down to the individual. And even if we bring technology to this environment, they look suspiciously like individual achievement when, we have all sorts of possibilities, but we look at, examples like this, which look oddly, again, less collaborative than they should be. And we've applied, in terms of ed tech, you've probably heard of the SAMR model, substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition. And often when we look at technological environments, they don't get very far beyond this. And I took this from Reddit. And, it's sort of this idea where, if you apply the SAMR model to this, it's really not going very far. This is basic substitution. It's not doing a whole lot in terms of changing things. Now, once you enter into the idea of learning networks, and in particular, I want to talk about participatory culture. So participatory culture, this comes from Henry Jenkins, who was at MIT and who's at USC now. And really, it's not just simply about education, it's about this new mode of participation that many kids, the YouTube culture, are really embedded in. The best way to describe this is probably through a meme. Nyan Cat, a Nyan Cat, and I think this video actually is a bit self-explanatory. So.
Unlike the one-way entertainment of the 20th century, this community participation is how we become a part of the phenomenon, either by spreading it or doing something new with it. So, Nyan Cat is a looped animation with loop music. It's this, just like this. It's been viewed nearly 50 million times this year. And if you think that that is weird, you should know that there is a 3-hour version of this that's been viewed 4 million times. Even cats were watching this video. Cats were watching other cats watch this video. All right, but what's important here is the creativity that it inspired amongst this techie, geeky internet culture. There were remixes. Someone made an old-timey version. And then it went international. An entire remix community sprouted up that brought it from being just a stupid joke to something that we could all actually be a part of. Because we don't just enjoy now, we participate.
And I think that's one of the biggest deals when we look at Web 2.0 culture or Web 2 or participatory culture. And it goes back again to networks. And networks have been around for a long, long time, and you've probably heard some of the more popular theories around them. Milgram in the 60s talked about the 6 degrees of separation, the small world theory, and that actually, the theoretical pieces around that go well back into the early 1900s. There's that idea that we're closer and closer to every single person on the world, on the planet. Back then it was 6 degrees of separation. Now they've done recent analysis, and although we've gained about 2 billion people, we're at about 4.2, connected to at least certainly the Western world in terms of orders of acquaintance. Stephen Johnson wrote a really great book a while back, Where Good Ideas Come From, and he really kind of calls out on how we've actually looked at the idea of innovation. So we used to sort of have this romantic idea of sitting in rooms and thinking really hard about particular ideas, and then we come up with a really great idea when really it's much more embedded in our society and in our social interactions. So that idea has been really interesting and really is a call for more people to get their ideas out there, even if it's in half-baked form. And then there's Granovetter's strength of weak ties, which I think from a sociological perspective, this idea that we can actually connect with some of our greatest collaborators online. And the reason I'm talking about these pieces really is this is sort of the new expectation of learners to become more social, to become more connected. And this has some really direct effects on what we look at in terms of access and equity. So going back to sort of the Cartesian view of learning, that knowledge is a substance, that pedagogy is knowledge as pedagogy is knowledge transfer. We look at this more social view of learning, and again, this comes even back from the 60s. Bandura, another Canadian. We participate, therefore we are. Understanding is socially constructed. In terms of even our systems in learning management systems, for instance, this is from John Mott and David Wiley. They talk about how we've had this very typical perspective. When we look at developing course communities, for instance, in learning management systems, what we do is we get students to build communities in these for about 4 months, and then we just happen to abandon all of these connections, and we basically delete and archive their courses, and then they start over again. Versus this idea of the personal learning network, which exists well beyond all of this. Now, back in 2006 during my dissertation, I talked about the personal learning network and how we as individuals can be sort of in the center of this and connected to all of these different tools outside of that. What I didn't realize at the time, which has become more true and apparent to me, is that really personal learning networks are about people. And so the things I've done as an academic, and I see through my learners, is you use all of these different tools, many of the tools not even allowed or not mandated or supported by your institution, but they're connecting you to so many other people outside of us. And it's not just sort of my area of expertise that kind of gets me to this idea that learning is much more social. If you look at the National Council for Teachers of English, we look at the idea of 21st century learners and what they must do. So the first top few ones: develop proficiency with the tools of technology. This is a very social one: build relationships with others to pose and solve problems. They talk about designing and sharing information for a global community. So it's no longer technology or knowledge that you create in your class and keep in your class. It's stuff to be shared beyond your classroom. This is from the Horizon report, the K-12 version. One of their big important pieces here is networking with real world, social networks, learning events. In terms of the K-12, the higher ed version of this, one of the key constructs here at the very beginning in terms of things that are affecting us in higher ed in the next 2 years: growing ubiquity of social media, integration of online, hybrid, and collaborative learning. Again, back to the social construct. This is another piece. This is 10 skills for the future workforce, and I will give you all of these links later, I promise, if they're not tweeting. This, I think, is really quite interesting. 10 skills for the future workforce. Social intelligence being one of the most important. Cross-cultural competency, new media literacy again, virtual collaboration, and down here, cognitive load management, which probably all of you are dealing with right now. So these sorts of things I think are really important. Now, so in this networked age of abundance, as we have more and more content available to us, come incredible challenges. The first one I want to discuss is, access. And this is where I get to the sort of the crux of this presentation here. So I think, these are some of the things that have been fantastic around what's happened in the last few years. So from learning objects, we've come to open educational resources and open content. And this is actually a really interesting area. Beyond OERs, or open educational resources, which I think we developed, certainly there are mechanisms like Creative Commons, which is totally underutilized in so many classes I see globally. To think that we can actually reject the traditional notion of copyright and copy left more things, I think is fantastic. There are sites like archive.org, which just is a fantastic representation of public domain objects, which I use in so many classes, and my students use it in their work. Clint Lalonde is here, and he will be talking about the Open Textbook Project, which I hope in Saskatchewan will pick up some of these, and they're developing, 40 textbooks?
76.
76, 40 back there, okay. So this idea of open textbooks for students that are open accessible, I think Max, you've been a big supporter of this as well at the U of S. this is something that we, in terms of content, this is something, a trend that we have to continue to move on with. Then there's MOOCs. MOOCs have come out of nowhere, and I'm going to talk about these as well. MOOCs are, some people think they're great, some people think they're horrible, somewhere in between. But I think, if anything, they've really gotten us to think differently about online learning. And this is actually a diagram from Matthew Cohere from U Delaware. And he talks about MOOC, every letter is negotiable. And this, to me, really is, this is where the heart of MOOCs really fits. That we can actually look at so many different possible models for doing online learning. So, I've done MOOCs that have been 150, the biggest one I've done is 13,000 people. So when you look at the idea of a MOOC, you can range. I think the largest one ever was like 250,000 people or 230,000 people at Stanford, or it might have been edX. Open registration, whether it's local, there's some of the greatest MOOCs models I've seen include not only network collaboration, but also creating local cohorts, which has been really kind of a neat piece. And even the idea of course, whether it's a course that lasts 10 weeks long or 2 weeks long or will last forever. There's one that I started in 2013 that really hasn't ended, which is, and I don't really do much with it anymore. It just became its own thing. It became a community, and that's really one of the greatest things that you can see in a MOOC. And beyond MOOCs, there's YouTube. To me, the web is like the original MOOC. YouTube itself is all sorts of MOOCs, I guess, in one. Whether that's youtube.com/education, or if you look even at the way that people are looking at things like YouTube, how to learn how to play guitar for beginners, or how to learn how to sing, how to learn to dance. The common search tools or search requests in YouTube really do show something that people are looking to do these things. I'm not sure who's going to do the splits in one day, but certainly not me. But that sort of thing, people are looking for knowledge. And I always intertwine personal stories. I think of my daughter, who does her personal instruction. She goes to a fantastic piano teacher and does her formal instruction. She spends some time practicing, certainly, using the augmentation of an iPad, but she's able to use apps, and this is more on her theoretical work. One time she came up to me and asked me to help her learn the song The Luckiest by Ben Folds 5. I didn't have that time that evening. I was being a bad dad, and I just said, I promise I'll help you with it tomorrow. And this was something that it was a really complex song for her age at that time, even for me. And so I said, I promise I'll do it, tomorrow. And she just sort of kind of huffed and puffed and went to the other room. And then I caught her sort of learning on YouTube, basically. So, about an hour later, she had found a YouTube video that basically explained the song to her and showed the song to her note by note. And this is this idea that really kids don't have to wait for learning anymore. Kids don't have to sit there and come to class and wait to see what's going to happen. They can binge learn if they really want to. And of course, performance. Now, my daughter's not performing online, but at least that I know of. And I think that's really an important piece. And we bring these global, when we look at these sort of really interesting stories, there are global versions of them as well. This is about the OLPC, or the One Laptop Per Child project. A fairly famous story now about these kids. They're Ethiopian kids who had they dropped off these boxes of these OLPC laptops. And from the article here, within 4 minutes, one kid not only opened the box, found the on-off switch, powered it up. Within 5 days, they were using 47 apps per child per day. Within 2 weeks, they were singing ABC songs in the village, and within 5 months, they had hacked Android. And this was all without any instruction from an adult at all, which was really kind of an interesting piece in terms of providing tools for kids. Another example of this is something I just purchased a few days ago. This is something called Kano, which is a far cry from the Apple IIc that I grew up with. But Kano is a little computer that you make yourself, and it allows you to go through various things. This is about 30 minutes after my daughter opened Kano, where she built her own computer, and she's now coding Python, which I thought was really without even knowing that she's coding Python, which is amazing. Now, I put myself in that very privileged category, that my daughter is able to do this in front of her big screen TV. And that's where we have to look at the idea of, is there really access? So OERs and copyleft materials and cheaper tools have certainly brought parts of the world content and access to technology, but we see that even in some of our most techno-utopian aspects, there's a lot of places where there's not access, and who has access? So there's a paper here, the MOOC phenomenon. They looked at, I think they surveyed around 140,000 Coursera participants, but finally only about 34,000 responded, which is a great sample. In 201 countries, and they noticed that 83% of these MOOC participants already had 2 or a 4-year degree. So people who are well educated are taking MOOCs. 44% have an advanced degree, 70% are employed, and in this particular case, about 57% are male. So looking at who's actually taking MOOCs, for instance, is really revealing, I think. In those countries, China, India, Brazil, South Africa, almost 80% of the MOOC students came from the wealthiest and most well-educated 6% of the population. And again, so this is replicating access in many ways. Another article recently, MOOCs and Democratic Education. They talk about how, ironically, although the move towards online education is being advanced by some of the nation's most elite universities, in the end it'll be the lower half of the student population that will be forced out of the traditional classroom, widening the gap. Basically, they're talking about that there will be this 2-tier system, that MOOCs will be for those who can't afford to come to college, and those people who will have these really rich experiences in universities will be, again, the one. So it'll actually widens the gap. They say this bifurcated approach to education fails the democratic test of equal access to all. So while there is equal access to some content, it's not certainly equally distributed or of equal quality. One more, this is from another article, Slate, I believe. Basic requirements to participate are huge barriers in large parts of the world. So they talk about who can actually participate in a MOOC. They look at the idea you need regular access to high-speed internet. You need a level of previous education sufficient to understand content. You need the ability to understand courses that are almost exclusively in English. And you need enough free time to actually study several hours a week. And again, this is incredibly important stuff. I mean, just that leisure time that we often take for granted, or time to educate, is something that certainly many parts of the world do not have. And the gender gap becomes much more pronounced in the BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Gender gap becomes more pronounced in developing nations, so from 56% to about 68%, which really does recognize a difference in access towards women, or different attitudes in terms of how women have access to education. Another article, and this is actually one from the Eastern Canada. Study notes challenges in terms of intersection between the traditional models. This was actually with First Nations a group of students. Study notes challenges in terms of intersection between the traditional model of web-delivered courses and needs and wants of Indigenous learner communities. Lack of technology literacy, access to up-to-date equipment, and high-speed broadband were cited as barriers. And students report feeling lost and alone in the course because their modalities weren't perhaps properly addressed in this particular course. So looking at even the type of courses offered, web-based or web-delivered, highly text content, in many cases, is not nearly addressing students' needs, even in Canada, certainly. Now, if we look at open access, and I'm a big supporter of open access, but we also look at sort of the glaring sort of big business models that are coming into universities as well. So in 1998, there was 8 key players in the publishing market. You see this great amalgamation of wealth and resources in these particular spaces, and this is becoming, even while open access we see as thriving, we actually see it becoming much more worse, and big publishing becoming much more powerful. And in terms of library costs, and I'm not sure if Bill can talk about this or someone else, but in terms of consumer price index, how the rise in costs for scholarly contributions are becoming much, much higher than anything else that we have in terms of our new normal consumer index. And this is becoming very sad. And the required open access it's a big one. Registry of Open Access Repositories, Mandatory Archiving Policy. Basically a list of institutions, including libraries and faculties, for instance, that are saying if you publish something, you need to basically put something in our institutional repository. You need to have at least a local copy that's accessible to everyone. I've recently done one of these. This is actually, if you haven't got a chance to read this, this is by Dana Boyd. It's from 2008. It talks about open access in the future, boycott, lockdown, academic journals, the idea that we should just sort of, I mean, it's not just not publishing in them, but it's not reviewing for them, it's not supporting them in any possible way if we can possibly do this. And it talks about different levels of power that you may have as an academic. Tenured faculty do one thing, new emerging scholars may have to do something different. And I've myself signed a bit of an open access sort of pledge that I continue to only support open access journals. There's also the Directory of Open Access Journals, which I think is really important. There's now, I believe, over 10,000 journals listed on this site, including one from at least one from the University of Regina, which is this one. This is one that we've had in the faculty since the early 1990s. We went open access in 2009, and we went from dozens of subscriptions to tens of thousands of subscriptions, which goes back to even Seth Schmoller, who talks about when journals go online, you often see a growth in esteem, readership, submissions, citations, and overall influence and utility, which I think is something we've always wanted as academics. Certainly I have anyway, at least I think in terms of access. Now, a more personal perspective on this, I remember some years ago my daughter was sick in the hospital, and she was prescribed something for pneumonia. And I looked at the drug itself in terms of what it could be, and of course, I'm not, especially in a case like this, I'm very curious to see if this is the right drug, if doctors and nurses are making the right choices around the health of my child. And I looked for this article, and I found an article online, but I could only access it, and I didn't have access to even, our library. So I actually talked to Valerie about this, and she was able to get me through her library system access to this journal. But after I'm reading this medical article, I'm thinking, I don't have, people who are not in the academy don't have access to articles like that, don't have access to be able to read, the high quality stuff. So as a very privileged parent, who works in a higher education institution, I'm able to access that not only through my own library, but through networks. And that is a really telling thing in terms of providing access and care to parents and so on. And there's a really great documentary called Remix, a RIP, a Remixer's Manifesto. And it starts out about music. It's basically, it's a documentary that follows a guy by the name of Geraldton, who's a remixer. And through the entire course, they talk about, sort of the copyleft and fair use and fair dealing pieces around music. But as the documentary moves on, it actually gets into Brazilian favelas and talks about how, in many cases, their governments have rejected pharmaceutical patents and have just basically said, in the case that they use is, HIV positive patients who can't afford the medication that come out of U.S. pharmaceutical companies, and they've basically just gone and made copies of these drugs and so on. It's really kind of an interesting tool, and it really fits in with a lot of this piece around access. Now, beyond access, there's also, I think, equity, literacy, identity, and voice. When we look at equity, I think the ones that I will address is the idea of literacy, identity, and voice. Going fast enough for you? I promise all this stuff will be yours afterwards. So when I'm looking at my own professional learning, today one of the places I will go to is certainly Twitter. Twitter is a huge source of professional learning for me, as well as we use it in our undergraduate classes. So, for instance, following a hashtag like higher ed gets me connected to many scholars who are using that particular hashtag. New teachers, for instance, and these are just examples because there's obviously thousands of different hashtags you can use, but new teachers often use new teacher chat, and many of our pre-service teachers in the Faculty of Education follow that along to help them grow as new teachers. There are things like PhD chat for students who are taking PhDs, and this is actually originally out of Australia, out of a university in near, I forget where exactly. But in terms of actually supporting you, I think this is really kind of a neat way that people are going through the same process through a PhD. The protocols may not be exactly the same where you are, but it creates a really interesting support network. Even if you're looking at things like blended learning, or in Saskatchewan, educators are connected through Sask EdChat. Now, a lot of other things that are really quite interesting on Twitter, the types of projects you don't even expect. So for instance, there's a Twitter account that is World War II tweets. So this guy actually started it 3 years ago, and he tweets every single day of World War II. So what would have happened in July 1st, 1940? He basically tweets it and corresponds it exactly to the day. And so this is roughly a 6-year project that he's running that shadows the duration of World War II, which is really quite something. There are other modes of inspiration, even on Twitter. There was a great photography assignment account that was called Daily Shoot. Every single day for about 690 days, there was a photography assignment, and every single day there would be a different hashtag, and you could see everyone's contributions on that single hashtag on every day. So the assignment could have been one particular thing, like use the color red in a creative way today, and you can actually see how thousands of people who used the color red in a creative way that day and what that meant to them. It was really kind of a neat project. There's another one that's running currently, is called the Daily Create by a guy by the name of Alan Levine from Arizona. Really kind of a neat project. Another one that I subscribe to is just a Twitter list of museum bots. Those museums that actually tweet out from their inventory every single day, which is really quite something. Now, when I use Twitter, and I use it in proactive ways, so this is me at the beginning contemplating my sabbatical, and obviously should have thought it out a bit better, because I ended up working a lot during the time. So I tweeted out, coming into my sabbatical, so I'm thinking about running an EdTech MOOC starting January. Anyone interested in facilitating and/or enrolling? So I put out a call for my blog, and then what emerged from that was this @MOOC site. This is the MOOC that just really hasn't ended. And in this particular case, and this wasn't offered through the University of Regina, this was just offered from my desk, kind of. I mean, certainly I'm affiliated with the University of Regina, but it changes the way that you're affiliated. So, from that, I got 2,000 participants from 75 countries. And I'm not Coursera or Udacity or anything else. I'm just some dude in an office. And I think that really changes things. Now, one of the things that we were able to do during this time, we actually did this, for me to get students connected, was this lip dub. And so we chose a song. I won't show the whole thing. We chose a song on Google Docs. Students, what they were able to do is basically choose a line that they'd like to sing. And I'll just show you a piece of this. But you'll notice very quickly that students from around the world who took this class, as you can see, we have Uruguay and Red Deer sort of opposed there, and Vancouver and Red Deer, Adelaide, and snowy Manitoba. And it was really quite amazing to see how people got connected in a very, very rich way. Again, when we look at the participants, and I mean, most of these were teachers. Most of these people who already were able to do things in this way, and often very comfortable and able in their identities in terms of being online. And it was really kind of an interesting piece, and I'll talk about that in a second. So this is one way of connecting, and there's certainly a great amount of privilege in the way that these people can connect. If anyone wants to do something like this, I've actually created a whole blog post on the making of the @MOOC lip dub. Now, if we look at these concepts, so what does it mean? Do we really have, this sort of flat place in terms of technological literacy, identity, and voice? So, Christine Grinnell, not too long ago from MSU, put out a article. It's kind of a cutesy title, but Twitteracy, tweeting as new literacy practice. And I think that's a really important idea to start thinking about. And it's not just Twitter, it's technological literacy in general. And the Horizon report actually identifies one of the biggest challenges for moving into this more connected realm is the technological literacies of the academic faculty in particular. And this is happening as early as grade 1. This is a worksheet I found from Australia where they actually have a Twitter worksheet, which I think is kind of an interesting thing right here, where they have the hashtag built in, but they have students, like there's a student Twitter account that the teacher tweets from, but kids actually have time to suggest a tweet that might come out of this account. And I think that's really, we should all probably have this worksheet because it gives us a bit of a buffer before tweeting something and not tweeting something. But I love this idea that at grade 1 they're already being very intentional about what they put online. And I love, it's a really kind of an important piece. But we learned about the telephone in grade 1. I mean, we need to be talking about these particular literacies as well. Now, beyond, sort of the semantic, like I've seen the semantic density of what a Twitter feed might look like in terms of hashtags and follows. It's actually really quite difficult to figure out, especially someone who hasn't spent some time with it. But then there's a famous person, Abraham Lincoln, who said, the trouble with quotes on the internet is that you never can figure out if they're genuine. Anyway, that's one of my favorites. All right, so I'm going to go back. This is that information literacy piece, which I think is really important. And some of you may remember this. This is from 1957 from the BBC.
It isn't only in Britain that spring this year has taken everyone by surprise. Here, in the Ticino, on the borders of Switzerland and Italy, the slopes overlooking Lake Lugano have already burst into flower, at least a fortnight earlier than usual. But what, you may ask, has the early and welcome arrival of bees and blossom to do with food? Well, it's simply that the past winter, one of the mildest in living memory, has had its effect in other ways as well. Most important of all, it's resulted in an exceptionally heavy spaghetti crop. The last 2 weeks of March are an anxious time for the spaghetti farmer. There's always the chance of a late frost, which, while not entirely ruining the crop, generally impairs the flavour and makes it difficult for him to obtain top prices in world markets. But now these dangers are over, and the spaghetti harvest goes forward.
All of the people just sort of gathering spaghetti here, which is quite something. Now, what came out of this, they actually ran this several times, but every year people would mail them, how do you get hold of these spaghetti seeds? How do we actually grow these things and ask you for instructions? And it was a really kind of interesting hoax. But that's when you needed a station to create a hoax like this. And this is actually for a class assignment. The student faked a 5-week vacation in Southeast Asia. So she basically created all these pictures and photos on her Facebook feed. She went to the local Buddhist temple, and she basically did whatever she could to see how many people she could actually take out in terms of doing this. Now, we see all sorts of examples. This is one of my favorite on YouTube. This was how to charge an iPod using electrolytes and an onion. So it was a really kind of well thought out video where you have an onion, you soak it in Gatorade overnight, and then they take it out and then they plug it into an iPod and it seems to charge on. And you can tell it's fake if you look really closely. But what you see here is people actually falling into the joke and doing it, and it doesn't really destroy anything. It gunks up your cable a little bit for the most part, and you can pick it up with a toothpick or whatever. But it gets people in the feed, even because YouTube can be a horrible place, saying that this worked really well. And it's very similar to what happened recently when iOS 8 was released. There was iOS 8. This was a 4chan brochure that someone created that looks very authentic to what Apple would create, and they called it iOS 8 Wave, which allows you to charge your phone in the microwave. And so what happened here was, people on Twitter reported charging their phone on the microwave with not so great results. In this case, here's another one. I tried using a new iOS feature, Wave, where you can charge your phone with a microwave. It does not work at Apple. And then, of course, people, supporting the lie, tried out the new Apple Wave feature. Well, never charge faster, right? So you see this sort of mix. Now, McLuhan had it right, way back in the day. One of the effects of living with the electric information is that we live habitually in a state of information overload. There's always more than you can cope with. And I mean, this is one of the reasons, there's a lot of tools out there. I use Feedly and Storify and a lot of social curation tools. And my network itself allows me to deal with this mess of information. And I think those who are less connected, or less connected through networks of trust, have a very difficult time with a lot of this. Now, identity itself is another big deal. And if you look at how people get into trouble online, or at least what we call trouble at this particular time. Now, a couple of years ago, actually this is probably more than a couple, 5 or 6 years ago, I think, there was the government put out a Saskatchewan Wanderer contest, and it was this kind of interesting project where you could be the tweeter and Facebooker and Instagrammer for Saskatchewan government in our tourism branch that basically talked about some of the great things that we have in our province. And there was a kid, about 19 years old, from Prince Albert, who actually was disqualified and he was actually doing really well. And this kid's actually a great guy. He's still on Twitter, but he was disqualified over this particular project. And the reason he was disqualified is because at the age of 17, he was singing a very off-color song in the college section of the Rider, in the Rider at a Rider game. And this was captured on YouTube, put up there, and it allowed him to be disqualified from this competition because it's not something that you want to put in your resume in terms of putting this online. He didn't put it up there; someone else put it up for him, but he was disqualified for this. If you are in Canada and you kill someone under the age of 18, you are mostly protected by the Young Offenders Act, or what it now is called. But when you do something on social media, there's not the same sort of rights and protection. Now, you see people making mistakes all the time. We see this amongst our students all the time. This is probably not the place where you're being smiling and sending a selfie, an inappropriate selfie in this chance. This is gearing up for Halloween here. You look at examples like this that are just totally inappropriate but totally oblivious to those people who are posting it. And so we've seen examples of this. At our university, I see them across Canada by our students all the time. That when we expect students to be out there, what are our expectations? What happens when our expectations fail? This is someone who should know better, right? This is an ad executive, and you may have seen this controversy where she tweets something out like this. She puts it out online. She gets on a plane, and basically there are thousands and thousands of tweets about this. There was a hashtag born, has Justine landed yet? And by the time she did land, she had lost her job and all credibility in the business. And so this is really an interesting thing. I'm not going to show you this video, but this is a girl who was at UCLA, and her name is Alexandra Wallace. She went on to this video, and she says, this is not for everybody, this is just for my friends. But you can't do that on YouTube where you say, this is just for my friends. And she was complaining about Asians in the library, and it was horrible. It was a really racist rant. And then, if your UCLA chancellor in his very first video ever on YouTube is about you, you're probably in trouble. And so he had to appear because he's defending the institution that this person, Alexandra Wallace, does not represent the views of UCLA, because it's rather damaging. We have to think about identity not only for our students, but also as our institutions as well, and how those apply. On the other hand of this, and I think this is one of my favorite quotes recently, is when you decline to create or to curate a culture in your spaces, you're responsible for what spawns on that back. If we're not addressing how students talk or discuss or interact in these particular social media spaces, we get what we deserve. And that's one of the reasons, there are some great kind of measures that are happening out there. So the European Union, many of you probably know about this already, they have a ruling that allows people to remove pieces of their past. So if you've tweeted something or created a selfie that wasn't so appropriate, you can petition Google and they're supposed to take it down for you. But this gives Google such great power that it revises history for us, which is really kind of a scary thing, that one industry basically has the ability to change his history for us to know. And I think positivity, and one of the things that we do in our institutions, at least when we can do it, is really important. Now, Godin talks about this idea that everything you do now ends up in your permanent record. The best plan is to overload Google with a long tail of good stuff and to always act as if you're on camera because you are. And I think that's kind of a scary thing, but at the same time, we see, like in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, Kathy Cassidy, helping her students create positive digital identities from grade 1. Now, this may not fly with everyone in this room, but it's happening, and in that particular case, at least, the parents have given full consent to allow their students to grow in this particular way. My students, this is an example of an e-portfolio. We try to get most of our faculty of education students to create a digital portfolio. This guy took the extra step and went and bought markgrenier.ca. This is his space on the web. He's purchasing that place. That's his connection point. University of Mary Washington. One of the things they do there is they buy a domain name for every one of their students. So here's your domain name. We're going to be your domain name registrar. We're going to host your space. You can name it whatever you want. Take control of your digital identity. We want you to fill it with good stuff, because the good stuff that you fill it with is directly affiliated with the good stuff that we are. You help define who we are. Now, of course, in this really scary space, when we look at all sorts of horrible things that are online, one of my favorite quotes from Lev Grossman, some of the comments on YouTube make you weep for the future of humanity, just for the spelling alone, never mind the obscenity and the naked hatred. There are horrible places online. If you have not followed Gamergate, if you want to look at especially issues that women face online, this is really an important hashtag. So it starts off with a male gamer who decides to talk about his girlfriend who recently released a game, and he basically blamed her in this blog post about how her relationship with this new journalist has given her really good game reviews rather than the merit of the game itself. And this blew up into this sort of this polar opposition of people who wanted integrity in gaming journalism to people who were really misogynistic and just really took down female gamers, to the point that there was this Anita Sarkeesian, who's a prominent female game blogger, who basically got horrible death threats. In fact, she was to present a keynote presentation at the university, a university in Utah, I forget which university, and there were threats of a massive, a massacre at this university. And of course, in Utah, you can carry guns. They would not consider taking away your right to bear arms to protect this particular woman and the participants at this particular place. Rather, they just let her cancel instead. So when you look at that, I don't face that. There was no, this sort of thing. We have to think about privilege and what others may feel as well. We also have to remember that voice is given to anyone online. This is, after the horrible tragedy in Ottawa, you see jihadists sneer at what happened online. It gives everyone an equal playing field in some cases. And then there's been some really interesting psychology reports on the composition of what makes up an internet troll, which of course is something we also need to look at as we move our students in online spaces. There are good things, some empowering voices in all of this, following hashtags like Yes All Women, really positive spaces which have brought, mostly positive spaces, nothing's totally positive, have brought light to a lot of issues. There are, even the hashtag Ferguson brought light to what was happening in that particular part of the world. Even like Not Your Mascot brought really important issues around the indigenization or the lack of in sports mascots, for instance. Now I'm going to conclude here quickly. And again, I will give you these links. I know, like I said, I warned you that I go through a lot of stuff really quickly. as a conclusion, there's a great book called Humanized by Nodder and Grant. And they say one of the reasons social media has grown so fast is that it taps into what we as human beings naturally love and need and want to do, to create, connect, share, and relate. Like, social media itself is only going to get bigger and bigger. Now, there's some projects out there that I absolutely love. This is just one of them. This is one of those things that I find that actually just connects technology in a very humanizing way and establishes pedagogy in a great way. So this is an example of, there were Brazilian students needing to learn English. And they connected them with a retirement home of people who just needed to talk to someone. And this is the result of part of that project.
We created a tool that connects our students with seniors in the USA living in retirement homes.
Hello, hello.
Melissa.
Hi, Dick.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
It's the first time that I'm talking with someone from another country.
I'm very excited to be doing this.
I look like I'm only 25, but I'm 88.
Do you have sisters and brothers?
No, I'm an only child.
Only one? Oh, you poor fellow.
I'm living with my old brother. He has 23 years.
Do you know, instead of saying he has 23 years, you could say he is 23 years old.
I tried to go to Lollapalooza that we have next week, I think, in Brazil, but my mom didn't let me.
You got a good mom.
Good morning, dear Julia. Good morning to you.
This is your dad?
That's me and my wife when we were young.
Oh, you were good looking when you were young. And you're still good looking.
My first destiny is United States, of course, because I wanted to put better my English.
Well, you do very well, I must say.
Are you planning someday to go to Brazil?
Oh, I would like to.
You can stay in my house if you want.
If you could just dream and have whatever you want, what do you think you would like to be doing?
I see myself in a big family, with a beautiful wife. I want to thank you for this change of experience, You are incredible.
Obrigado.
You are my new granddaughter, and I love you.
I love you too.
And if you were here, I would give you a big hug.
Oh yeah, let's hug. Oh.
Bye.
Bye.
So I love this tagline, more than better students, better people. And I think we can do that. And I think that's one of the most important pieces of all of this. And I'll just show you one last example. This is I saw this on Reddit. This was an anonymous post at one point. So a guy who had lost his mother posted this photograph. Basically said, anyone out there with some mad photoshopping skills, can you fix this photograph for me because she's got these oxygen tubing underneath? And people came to his assistance. It was really amazing to see. The first one, my best stamp, I only removed the tubing, left colors and levels alone. These are anonymous people not taking credit for this. This person's color corrected the skin tones. This person did a minor 6x4 lighting crop and some lighting stuff. And this guy fixed a chair. You see over back here, there's like a chunk out of the chair, and it's not quite red. This guy, he focused on the chair, but it's kind of good. And people are saying, sorry for the late help. This is just one of those moments that you see online that are really good, and they also exist in this anonymous space, which often we think is nothing but horrible. Now, the World Wide Web itself, and I think this is really important to understand, the World Wide Web, in whatever form it may be, whether it's through social networks or whatever it is reflects directly and implicates our lives. And I think that's really important to look at. Like the health of the World Wide Web is directly related to our own health. If you look at Nathan Jurgensen's work, he talks about digital dualism. We often talk about, as adults, the difference between us. We think about the idea of IRL, like this is real life, and then online is not real life. Versus what kids may more look at is the idea of AFK, away from keyboard. Away from keyboard is a very different way of looking at the world, especially when we digitize it. Now, if I think about my own experience, about 581 days ago was probably the worst day of my life when my own father passed away. and really a tough time. And if you think about this, I mean, if I look at this every single day, I posted that piece on YouTube. So it was just that announcement that my father had passed away, and I'm not even sure what you write that for or who you write it for. But very quickly, as I saw, and that this goes down for a long ways, I can see people from around the world that came together. And that was really important to me. And it might not have been important that day, but it was really important later on as I looked through this stuff. And so it goes on and on and on. And I'm really geeky. As I told you, I map everything, so I had to map this as well. And this, you know, as a young boy thinking about losing your parents, you never think that when that time comes that you can possibly think that people from around the world would connect with you in that particular way. That's amazing to me. The world, but I have to understand and recognize that I've got great privilege that I can do this, but I'd love to see others be able to connect and see the type of network that I've seen. One of the last photos, this is my dad in Humboldt, about 3 hours away from here, and my kids connected through Facebook. The humanizing quality of technology is so incredibly important. And I think this particular photograph really pictures it. As Clay Shirky says, we systematically overestimate the value of access to information and underestimate the value of access to each other. Web 1.0 is about getting information. Web 2.0 and beyond is about connecting with others. And if we're going to do that, how do we do that in a responsible way to give access to everyone to be able to do that sort of thing? So the two questions I'll leave you with, what can we do to adequately deal with the issues of the access and equity, especially given the world that we live in, the type of learning that we're seeing today? And another question is, how do you prepare students for network reality in relation to learning, identity, and voice? How do we give them voice? How do we allow them to access these networks in safe, respectful manners? And the big question just for you, and this is more of a challenge, how are you living and learning in our network reality? What are you doing to connect yourself in a different way that will allow you to know better for your students, to better understand how these networks work? And that's it. Thanks for letting me rant and go 4 minutes over. I'm so sorry. I owe you all coffee.
Having any questions or discussion, we're going to be having a response panel directly following this.